Okay, we'll be recording today, but please don't be conscious or anything like that. I still want you to participate as much as possible. So I would say with fundraising, it's a matter of being prepared. I've worked in fundraising now for close to 7 to 8 years, and I've started off working with grassroots organisations like many of you, where your income is possibly under £600,000 a year. You may have set up the charity because it's something that's driven you to do it. It's a cause, it was a need in your community. And those types of organisations are really run by volunteers. They don't necessarily have a main fundraiser. And I know that a huge percentage of our members are from grassroots organisations. I've also had the opportunity to work with national charity, bringing in over £10 million worth of income. So I've been a trust and foundations manager. So therefore, there's a lot of experience that I have, and I really feel that it's important that I share those experiences with you all. So choosing your funder. Many people get that right, but some don't always get it right. So I would say being prepared is key, looking at the funder's criteria. I know that many people might say, you know, I do look at their guidelines. Many people don't. It's important to see, you know, what type of funding that funder will fund. It's always important to read the guidelines to make sure that you're the right fit for the funder. A funder may only want to support an organisation delivering sports programmes or film programmes. I would say it's important to not just try to fit, not to try to fit not to try to fit your programme to fit what the funder wants, if you understand what I mean. It's important to fund a project that you are passionate about and not try to sort of lean to suit a funder that doesn't really fit what you're trying, your values or your mission. So just try to find the right funder. Also check the geographical area of the fund. Some funders may only fund sort of regionally, they may not fund groups in K&C. So it's also always important to check the geographical area. What we find at Young K&C is that we have groups that are unregistered that are trying to go for funding with us when we only fund charities, and some of our grant pots allows community interest companies to apply. So always check to see whether or not you're eligible, because what you'll find is that you'll sit for 2 or 3 hours or more doing an application form, and unfortunately your funding application will not be considered. So it's important to not waste any time. I would also say to you, check the income requirements. You might find that some funders will only fund organisations that have an income of up to maybe £250,000. So if your income is greater than that, please do not apply. I've noticed that the slides have not moved up. So Razaz, can we keep going? Keep going. That's it. There we go. Go back. There you go. And also a key thing to check is what the application process is. Sometimes you might find that it's a 2-stage application process where you might have to submit a proposal. And then the second part of it, you might need to submit a second stage part of that, which might be a more detailed application. So always have a look at the application process. Always look at how much the funder's offering. You know, you'll get to a point whereby you know how much money you'd want to be funded for your programme. So, for example, if a funder's funding a project that's £5,000, you know, but you only need 3, don't apply. Stick to what the minimum and maximum offer is for that funder. And always check to see whether or not you need to match fund your project. Often or not, some funders might want you to find the other half of the funds. So really do have a look. I would always say develop a prospect list. So once you've read the criteria, you know that you're the right fit for the organisation, you've gone onto Companies House, you've looked at their mission, their vision. If you're right, develop a prospect list of all the funders that will fund your programme. Okay, can I go to the next slide, please, Razaz? And the next thing I will say is think creatively about the project. I always find that we have a great number of supplementary schools that we work with, you know, and it's always good to involve partners. Some of my most successful funding application forms that I've personally done has been partnership funding application forms, where you might find a charity might work with a CIC, and they might work with that CIC primarily because that CIC is not eligible for the fund. So the CIC might work with a charity, and that CIC might have expertise. They might deliver sports programs, they might deliver arts programs, something that that charity may not have the resources or skill sets to deliver. So always think about partnerships. And it's always good to, you know, add different strands of work to your work stream. You could be a supplementary school that's never really explored things around, you know, heritage programs or things around the environment, or how to tackle pollution. So, you know, we've got great groups that are our members. We've got Urban Wise, we've got Fit for Life Youth, the list goes on. Have a look at who we have as members. And if you want to be introduced to anybody, please do speak to Razaz. She can always introduce you to groups. And also think about why your project's needed. A lot of people don't always, they just think, oh, well, we need more money. They may not think about a project that their young people may want to see. So it's also always important to speak to young people, find out what the needs are of the community that you serve, and always think about how to engage young people. It's so important to talk to your young people, because the programs essentially are for them, not for us as adults. We may not always know how to engage them. So think about the groups that you work with. Think about, you know, if you're working with underrepresented groups, if you're working with, I don't like to use the term BAME. So what we typically use at Young K&C now is a term global majority. And global majority is an alternative word for BAME. It looks at people of colour, but it's an empowering term. And we use that term whereby the majority outside of the UK or across regions across the world, people of colour are a majority. So we use that term global majority as an empowering term. So think about how you define the young people that you work with. Think about how you work with young people that may have special educational needs. Think about the young people that you work with and programs that will stimulate them. And a top tip I would say is think about your data sources. How do you, are we using our own unique data effectively? You know, do we use the information from our questionnaires that we collate when young people register with us? Do we know where those young people live? Do they live in areas of deprivation? How are we really thinking about how the project's needed and where the pockets of deprivation are? So have a look at your own data. You know, if you have, a database, use it. We use Salesforce at Young K&C, but I know many of youth providers use Upshot. So please use, your data to really define what type of program or what the needs are really. And also other generic data that you can use is, RBKC has great data, the London Poverty Profile, the Roundtree Foundation, K&C Foundation they've done great studies over the past sort of 10 years. Have a look at their data, see what the needs are. Can I go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Of time, Charlie's mentioned output. So what we've noticed is that in some of the funding application forms we've received from our members, that a lot of information is disregarded. So For example, we work with a number of supplementary schools. So I'm going to sort of base this on a supplementary school. So an output could be maths achievement is low in primary and secondary schools across K&C amongst African and Caribbean students. Who will benefit? Well, our residents that live in the Warnington Green Estate and Goulburn Road will benefit. The young people of African Caribbean descent, their age groups are referenced here. What will your activity do? What will it change? How will it change the needs? So you'll say we'll provide free tuition twice a week, 2 hours long, term time between September and July. As simplistic as this may sound, a lot of people do not state this in their application forms. There's other outputs that you can think about is total number of sessions that you'll be delivering, total session hours, number of staff needed, number of attendances, how many boys and girls will you be working with, and think about those different characteristics. So how many of them will be disabled young people? How many of them will be LGBTQ plus young people? How many of them will be from Caribbean descent? Have a think a little bit about those outputs. Okay, so when you've looked at your outputs, we're always going to be looking at things. How are we going to create an impact from what we initially thought our outputs would be? How are we going to track improvement? How are we going to demonstrate impact? So, for example, we work with many supplementary schools. So, in essence, how are we going to measure and track that performance? So for this particular group, maths achievement improved by 40% amongst the children that attended our session. This outcome has improved general attainment for Black and ethnic minority pupils in primary and secondary schools. So when you're defining performance, it's always good to think about what type of outcomes you want to see from your programs and what the overall impact will be. I know that within projects, things may change. You might set an outcome, you may not meet it. It might be a case whereby we've had a pandemic and we haven't sort of met our numbers. But, you know, I would say always adapt, speak to your funder, and always sort of think about adapting what your outcomes may be slightly. So you can see for this particular group, the impact that they achieve by running, sorry, because we had slides before, but they saw maths achievement improve by 40%, and they've achieved the general attainment for their pupils. So, as I said, with defining performance, reporting to funders, please let them know if you've had any changes in your projects. If we move to the next slide. Reporting and measuring success. Everybody has different ways of reporting and measuring success. If we looked at West London zone, they use case studies. A lot of charities, especially national charities, use case studies. They have a great picture. They talk about what they've done to change the outcomes for that person that's joined their service. It's always good to use case studies, I would say, especially in your proposal-based application forms, using videos and images to talk about your programs. Also speak to young people, have advisory groups at the end of each month. That's a good way to collate data on how you're doing with your programs. Use questionnaires to parents and carers. You know, questionnaires could be simple things like, what do you plan to gain from the sessions? You know, where are your young people academically? So, you know, use good questionnaires and speak to your staff. If you've got youth workers, they work quite closely with young people. Talk to your youth workers, find out how each child's doing, any challenges that they may come across. I think essentially it'd be good to know how each group in here measures and reports their own success. Razaz has done a poll. Go back a little bit, Razaz. So if each person can go click onto the poll and answer these questions for us. Can you see the results, everybody? Yeah. So I can see that the majority of our groups use videos, which are really good. A lot of our groups use videos. 82% use images, that we still images. And another one, a lot of our groups evaluate will do evaluation meetings with staff after each session activity. That's a really good way to really find out how young people are doing and if the programs need to be adapted. So that's fantastic, that's good to know. Thank you. So I would say top tips for application forms. I would say when you're going to approach a funder, research the funder, go on their website, look for hints and tips about funders. You might find that on forums. There's loads of forums on Facebook. You can, Google, you can use YouTube. Just find out how funders may want their application forms laid out. Get recommendations from other organisations. So, for example, you might find that the Royal Court or West London Zone have been funded by the John Lyons charity before. They may have been funded by the Big Lottery. Speak to those groups, find out whether or not they can help you, they can guide you along the process. Another thing that I would say to organisations, just generally about application forms, I always do it, copy questions from the application form into a Word document. During that time, think about your, use your project aims, who your stakeholders are, your stakeholder list, have your activity plan, your budget present, and those will help you to answer all of the fundraising questions you may have. Always, 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 always ask somebody to read your application form before you submit your application form. Always attach supporting documents such as safeguarding documents. If you're not sure about the documents that you may have, i.e. your safeguarding document, always speak to us. We can always advise you about your documents. If you're unsuccessful, please don't take it personally. We've had some groups that have taken it personally, and I would say, you know what, practice makes perfect. With application forms, it's a learning process, and all funding application forms will vary. Always ask for feedback from your funder and ways to improve. When you apply for small grants, it's a good way to build your track record. It could be a case that you can prove to the funder that, large funds, that they can take a gamble on you. If you go for larger pots after applying for, so if you apply for a small grant, you can always, scale up your projects through, larger funders. And I always would say get a mentor. I mean, I've had a mentor throughout my process. Get a mentor. It might not be somebody that you may know. You might say to us at Young K&C, do you know anybody who might want to mentor us? We really need some advice. We're a small group. We really want to, grow, our funds. Can you put us, match us with somebody? A mentor will always give you valuable advice. So, think about those top tips when you're applying for funding and when you're approaching funding application forms. The next thing I will say is how to connect with your funder. If you can scroll up for me, Razaz. Social media interaction. A lot of our groups are really good at social media interaction. Baraka, fantastic. Fit for Life Youth are really good. I would say follow your funders across a range of platforms: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I think Instagram is one of the most popular platforms for our members. Tag your funders at Young K&C, at John Lyons Charity, at the K&C Foundation. Use interactive images, videos. I know many of you said in the poll that you use videos. Demonstrate your good work. State how beneficial the grant has been to your organisation to achieve your outcomes. Like the funders' posts. Be part of their conversations. Also, on receipt of if you are successful with a funder, Thank the funder for the donation. A thank you letter always goes a long way. I know that's a technique used by a lot of national funders. Thank your funder. That could be in the form of a letter, an email. Thank them across a range of social media platforms. Add the funder's logo to your literature, to your flyers. And also on our City website, you can also add funders' logos to the City website as well. So that's a really good tool. Stay in touch with your funders, invite your funders to events, send funders updates. It could be, think creatively about it, could be in a postcard, email, letters, let them know what you're doing. And also because we've had a pandemic, you know, a lot of people wasn't able to deliver some of their programs. So let your funders know that you're adapting your project, but also let them know in advance. So that's that with connecting with funders. If you can see, here's another organisation, London Sports Trust. Since I've joined Young K&C, I think they tag us in all their posts. And here's them, they're doing some kayaking with young people. We're a funder, so we preach what we say. We tag our funders. The K&C Foundation, they funded our recent Disabled Young People's workshop. They've also funded this workshop, so we'll be tagging them after. Razaz, you'll be stepping in for Neve, so you'll be doing that for us. So I would say at this point, if you've got any questions. I can see one from Ahmed. What's the best way to approach business people, wealthy people to support funding in RBKC? So that's where you're looking at major donors. We're not covering major donors today, Ahmed, but how do you reach wealthy people? Well, I would say, how many people here have got a LinkedIn account? Do you use your LinkedIn? You've got a range of people on there, individuals, you have major donors there. You know, some people might do, you know, leaflets to local houses in the area. It might be, you know, a project that you might want to do. You might be, you know, putting together a case of support, case study. Some people do leaflet and circulate their leaflets through letterboxes in their local area. But if you want to talk about major donors, you know, there's something that you can talk to me about at a later date, Ahmed. If anyone's got any other questions. Yeah, the rich list is also a very good one, but I have found that some people do bombard people on the rich list. So every year, just in case some people don't know, a rich list is circulated, which provides you with a guide of all, you know, the billionaires in this country. And some people, what they might do is use that list. They might go onto Companies House to find these individuals. And there you might find addresses, send them across some of your work, let them know what you're up to. They might fund you. Do we have any other questions before we move on to the next segment?
Yeah, Anita, I've got one, if that's okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, brilliant. This is Ismail, sorry, from MCW. I don't know if you can see me on the gallery or not. I know it's set up for everyone differently. No, so far this has been amazing. Just one question. You mentioned it earlier on about the mentor element. Is that something that Young K&C can help out with, linking up, matching somebody up? Because obviously, for example, in our group, we had Claire from JLC, who, sorry, Claire, to put you out there, is a funder. And obviously, the way she broke down the scenario was quite good. So is there any way that we could be put in touch with the likes of Claire or whoever else it be? Is that something you guys can provide as a mentor?
We can. Of course we can. I mean, when we have our membership meetings with our members, I know Razaz is organising quite a few membership meetings. If mentors is what you need, we can actually see who we can match you with. A lot of our larger organisations, some are here, say some aren't, have been quite willing to support groups that might have smaller turnovers, grassroots organisations. So my thing is just to get in touch, let us know what your needs are, then we can see what we can do to help you. But having a mentor is really, really, really helpful. They can help you look at a funding application form, how you approach funding from a different perspective.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem. Okay, we're going to hand over now to Nicola.
So I'm going to target this at smaller organisations. and we have been involved in the grants panels with Young K&C. So I'm going to pick up on some of the things that have come up that would be my sort of top tips, some of which may touch on things that have come before. And what I would say is people have had a lot of information and some brilliant ideas today. If you are a smaller organisation, don't be overwhelmed by the sort of glossy case studies that the larger organisations are able to do. And certainly for me, when I'm looking at applications, if I know an organisation is quite large and if they do have a dedicated fundraiser, I think my expectations can be slightly higher. And in some ways, I can almost be more critical because I think, well, you've got somebody, this is their full-time job or certainly their half-time job to be doing this. So for smaller organisations, talk about what it is that you do with passion, because that's what we want to see. But explain what it is that you do. Assume I know nothing, because certainly for smaller organisations in K&C, I'm not going to know what it is necessarily that you do, or maybe about the issue that you're working with young people on. Be realistic. You don't need to be all things to all children and young people. Know your young people well and what their needs are. Refer to their needs and where they've told you about them or where their families have. So build on what it is that you know about your community. Be specific. So Anita shared before the break a great slide about the outputs. That is how specific we want you to be. So we do want a bit of the story of your organisation and young people, but be specific. How many sessions, how many young people, when you think that will happen. And then when it comes to the costings, is cost it in that way. It will be this amount of staff for this amount of sessions. In terms of telling us about need, we do want to know about the needs of your young people. And yes, by all means, use data, but don't overwhelm me with data and don't just cut and paste statistics. Use a few key statistics that really resonate for your organisation and your young people, and talk about how those statistics are relevant for your young people and how you can echo that. Tell us where relevant how you work with other organisations, because although you should assume we know nothing, I may well have visited the adventure playground that's 3 streets away from you. So if you're telling me you're doing play activities on a Saturday afternoon and the adventure playground has already told me that, I'm going to be questioning it. So you may say Saturday afternoon at the playground, we know they work with 8 to 11s. So our programme is for 11 to 14s. We're working with the older siblings of those younger ones. That reassures me that you're not duplicating activities and that you're aware of what else is going on in your neighbourhood. Where you can, really tell us about how young people have been involved. And certainly with Young K&C, there are young people that are on the panel. They will be going out to visit. So using the voices of your young people in your application will really resonate then with the young people that are looking at that application. Think about the governance of your organisation, and that please do, if you're a registered charity or a company in terms of being a KIC, make sure all your paperwork is up to date online, because I will check the Charity Commission, and if it's got a big red saying that you have not completed your annual return, I will not provide you with funding. That is the absolute basics of being a charity. You must meet those deadlines and you must meet Companies House deadlines. And most funders will be checking that. Make sure your website is up to date. It doesn't have to be fantastic, all singing or dancing, but I may well check your website. And if you tell me forthcoming events, and actually that was summer 2021, or you tell me that your latest news is actually that something happened in 2019, that doesn't really give a very good impression of your organisation. So I don't expect there to be lots, but just make it relevant. Ask somebody who maybe doesn't know your organisation that well, maybe family or friend, or somebody that you've come across, just say, just have a look at our website for 5 minutes. Just tell us what you're seeing, because it will only be 5 minutes if we're looking at your application that we'll look on your website. So all the key things need to be very easy to find. Back to governance. In terms of trustees or your directors, if you are a KIC, you really should have at least 3, and they should be unrelated. If it is not clear that they're unrelated, so if you do have Sam Jones and Belinda Jones, who are absolutely not related, but if you had a quick look on the Charity Commission, you may think they are, just make sure you mention that in the any other information box that's usually on most grant applications. It's really important that charitable boards look independent with public funds. I think it's already been said about get someone else to read it. Please don't leave your application until the last minute, particularly if it's electronic submission, because as we know, IT at 5 to 5 on a Friday is never going to be your friend. Try and do it at 9 o'clock on a Friday, because then you have got time during the day to ensure it really has uploaded and you've got that receipt back. And finally, if someone offers you help, take it. So quite often, Young K&C and other funders will say, if you need any help, please get in touch. So often there will be capacity building officers and people like that. If they're offering that help, take it, because they may well spot things that you haven't spotted. The more they know about your organisation, if other opportunities come along, they're more likely to have you in mind and maybe nudge you to say, have you seen this application? Because they then start to have that real vested interest in your organisation, and people get flattered. It's nice to feel that you can help. So please do use the help and support that is out there. There we go. Top tips in 4 minutes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Does anybody have any questions for Claire or any of the speakers who are on the line?
Hi, yeah, Chris here, Fit for Life Youth. Thanks for that, Claire. I was a bit unclear. So do you also, because I was under the impression that John Lyons didn't fund CICs. Are there funds that are available for CICs? Because we're not a charity, but we're a CIC.
We don't fund CICs directly, but we support Young K&C and will often sit on panels where they can support CICs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I'd like to say a massive thank you to the speakers we've had today. So Claire, Kita, Charlie, Anita and Razaz, thank you so much for your help. It's been really, really informative. We have been recording this so that we can put key snippets and key points on social media. We will also be sending you the slides and a certificate of attendance after this session is finished. So thank you very much again, and look forward to visiting your organisations and hopefully receiving some grant applications from you fairly soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And the slide deck will be available. Razaz will circulate that to everybody. And please complete our evaluation. I think Razaz has left a link in the chat box, but we'll also send it to you via email.